What's up, sports fans? This is the Lucas Ross Sports Channel. The 2024 college football season is now almost officially over. We still got one more game, and that, of course, is the 2025 National Championship game. But we are still, looking at 2024. This is the 2024-25 college football season. So with that almost coming up and the National Championship game and the season almost being entirely over, the bowl games are completed. I'm going to give you my final top 25 here for the entire 2024 season. It has been a great season. Don't get me wrong, it's probably one of the best college football seasons that I can't remember when the last time we had just a wide open college football season. So many conference races, so many conference, games that really came down to the wire, and so many great upsets happened this year in 2024 as well. It's 2025, but we're still looking at 2024. Again, this top 25, is going to be based off of how the teams finished, and then also I'm going to be talking about the playoff games as well, and then we'll talk about some of the bowl games. So we'll start from the bottom and work our way to the top, just like how I normally do for my top 25. This will be the final top 25 video of the 2024 season, because after the national championship, I'm going to give you my way too early top 25, because we're going to be looking way ahead to 2025 as soon as the national championship game is officially over. So let's go ahead and jump right into it, starting at the bottom from 21 through 25. I got Memphis at number 25, UNLV at number 24, Michigan at number 23, Florida at number 22, and then Miami at number 21. So Memphis and UNLV, two Group of 5 teams that finished their season pretty well. They beat a couple of Power 4 teams in their bowl games. Memphis with 11 wins on the season. And then UNLV beat California in their bowl game as well. UNLV was also the runner-up in the Group of 5 championship game against Boise State in the Mountain West. So yeah, both of these teams finished with 11 wins. Great seasons for both of these Group of 5 teams. Michigan and Florida were pretty close. They're both 8-5. I get it. You can make an argument that both of these teams should not be ranked, but they finished the season strong as both 8-5 teams. You look at Michigan, they just beat Alabama in the ReliaQuest Bowl. They came in there and, as an underdog in that game, I believe by double digits, and they beat them 19-13. I was so impressed with the Michigan defense, and this Michigan team finished the season strong. Not only they did, defeat Alabama, but they beat Ohio State, even with a little bit of a lesser roster talent. They beat Ohio State, the team that is playing in a national championship game. So what a great season, what a great turnaround for Michigan after this slow start to the first half of the year. It looks like Michigan probably could be a contender for the 12-team playoff next season, so watch out for Michigan. Again, they finished the season strong, but I think Florida kind of was the better 8-5 team, to be honest. You look at Florida, they won their last 3 games of the regular season. They beat LSU, they beat Ole Miss, and of course Florida State ended up being terrible. They were not really as good as we kind of expected them to be, but yeah, Florida, Billy Napier's got this program. It looks like it's turned things around. DJ Lagway, the quarterback's got a pretty bright future. I think he might be one of the best quarterbacks coming up in the country next year in 2025. So both Florida and Michigan have very high expectations going into 2025 based on their finishes in 2024. Miami at number 21, a tough loss in the Pop-Tarts Bowl against Iowa State, but they finished with 10 wins, 10-3 for Mario Cristobal. Definitely a better season compared to the first 2 years that he's been here at Miami. But, you got a transfer quarterback in Carson Beck coming over in 2025. That's going to be very interesting to watch. Cam Ward obviously going to be gone next year, so he would definitely, gave Miami some really good hopes. There was really one good thing and one bad thing about Cam Ward. And, the good thing about Cam Ward was his accuracy and throwing accuracy down the field, making explosive throws down the field. But when he's under pressure and he throws it a lot, that's really the big weakness of Cam Ward. But I'm anxious to see where he goes in the NFL draft. But he was just a great quarterback for Miami, and also I think he's one of the best quarterbacks in all of college football. Again, I think he's set the record for most touchdown passes and also most yards as a college football quarterback. So Miami didn't really finish the season where they wanted to, but they did miss out on the 12-team playoff, but they also had a tough loss there in the Pop-Tarts Bowl against Iowa State. So these are my rankings here from 21 through 25. Let's now go from 16 through 20. Indiana comes in at number 20, Clemson at number 19, South Carolina at 18, Alabama at 17, and then Syracuse at 16. Indiana, tough loss for them in the college football playoff round 1 matchup against Notre Dame. They weren't really that competitive in the first half of the game, but second half it looked like Indiana kind of got things like turned around. I just think when Indiana went up against a very talented team, that they're just not on the level yet. And also, playing on the road in a first-round game was kind of a disadvantage for some of these first-round teams that had to play on a campus in the first round of the playoff, especially for Clemson as well. They had to play Texas, but yeah, what a job Kirk Cinetti did. I was kind of underrating Indiana ever since the start of the season, but I did not expect them to win 11 games. They were definitely underrated, but the reason why I think they won 11 games was because of their schedule and how it's set up, and also the teams that they played in the Big Ten. They were not really as good as we were kind of expecting either. So Indiana at number 20. Clemson at 19, a tough loss to Texas in the first round of the playoff. But this team wins 10 games. They won the ACC championship this year. And it's just been up and down for Clemson. But this offense was definitely better compared to where they were in like the last few years. Cade Klubnik, just announced that he's coming back for another year. So that's a huge return there for Clemson. You get your starting quarterback coming back for 2025. Won't be surprised, though, if Clemson is back in the playoff next season, but also won't be surprised if they do make it to the ACC championship. South Carolina at 18. You're probably thinking, why is South Carolina ahead of Clemson? Because Clemson made it to the playoff. Well, South Carolina ended up beating Clemson in the head-to-head matchup, so that's the reason why I kept South Carolina ahead here in these rankings, ahead of Clemson. So South Carolina won the head-to-head, but South Carolina, tough loss in the Cheez-It Bowl to Illinois. It was a competitive game, and I tell you what, the tension between Shane Beamer and the head coach of Illinois, that was crazy in that type of bowl game. But yeah, South Carolina, tough loss for them, but they do finish 9-4, a really good season and a pretty good turnaround here for South Carolina. Nenore Sellers might be a really good quarterback next year. We'll just see what he makes a decision here. Alabama at number 17. Tough loss to Michigan in the ReliaQuest Bowl, but we've seen Alabama like that all year, it seems like. Alabama in the first half of the year, they were looking like one of the top teams in the country. The offense was so explosive. They also beat Georgia. That was probably their biggest win of the season. They also beat LSU, but Alabama's offense has just been so inconsistent against really good defensive teams. That happened, of course, in the Oklahoma game where they got beat by 24-3. That also kind of happened, not in the Vanderbilt game, but they got, beat in that game. So that was probably the biggest upset of the year, was Alabama going down to Vanderbilt, and then, of course, losing to Michigan in the ReliaQuest Bowl. Yeah, just a pretty up-and-down season for Alabama, but they go 9-4. I get it, it's Kalen DeBoer's first year, but it's really unlikely for Alabama to go 9-4 like this. But we'll see if Alabama can turn things around. Next year they're going to lose Jalen Milroe at quarterback. We'll see how that's going to play out and see what the future looks like at quarterback for the Crimson Tide. Syracuse finishes 10-3. What a great year for the Orange. Kyle McCord, of course, one of the most underrated quarterbacks in the country. If you look at his numbers on the season, tell me why, Kyle McCord was not a Heisman candidate. I get it, he did have some bad games here and there, but it just seems like when he's off to a slow start, he just really corrects himself, and he was much more better under this system compared to where he was at Ohio State. So what a great season for Syracuse. They blow out Washington State in their bowl game, and they go 10-3 here to finish out 2024. Won't be surprised if Syracuse is a contender in the ACC next year. Their schedule probably is not too bad compared to where it was this year. That's probably the reason why Syracuse also had a pretty good season, just because of how the schedule set up. So those are my rankings there from 16 through 20. 11 through 15 now. Iowa State at number 15, Illinois at 14, Missouri at 13, SMU at 12, and then BYU at 11. Iowa State at number 15, a really impressive win against Miami in the Pop-Tarts Bowl. It was a shootout here between these two teams. But this is an Iowa State team that also made it to the Big 12 championship this year. They got blown out by Arizona State, but it was still a really good season for the Cyclones. And this is another team kind of compared to Indiana. I was very underrating in the offseason. With all that experience coming back for this Iowa State team, I feel like they could make a big jump in the Big 12 this year, but I didn't really expect them to be a top contender in the Big 12. I was just kind of projecting them to be a dark horse team to get right around 7-8 wins, somewhere in that range. But no, this team went 11-3. So what a great season for Iowa State at number 15. Illinois at number 14, just talked about it. They beat South Carolina in the Cheez-It Bowl. And this team goes 10-3. Did not expect Illinois to go 10-3 this year. This was another team that was kind of overrating, not underrating, to be honest, because I was not really high on Illinois. A lot of other people are not really high on Illinois either, but it seems like this team has a good year, and then the next year they have a bad year, and then, of course, the next couple of years they have the good year, and then, of course, the bad year again. So can Illinois keep this up? Illinois is a team that looks like it has a really bright future. Again, they've done this before. They've had good seasons up and down. Again, they just have a really good year, and then, of course, the next year is a bad year, and then it's a good year again, and then it's another bad year. It just seems like it goes back and forth for Illinois. But again, a very good win against South Carolina in a competitive defensive battle. They win it here, so they win 10 games in 2024. Missouri at 13, back-to-back 10-win seasons under Eli Drinkwitz. Eli Drinkwitz has got this Missouri team being a contender in the SEC. They weren't really that close to being a contender. They've had some 3 tough losses this year in the SEC, but still, they get 10 wins, and that's enough for me to put them here in the top 25. SMU at number 12. They got blown out by Penn State in the college football playoff round 1 game, 38-10. Yeah, it was just a bad game for SMU. Kevin Jennings played pretty awful in this game. And I'm not saying SMU is a bad team. Look, they did really good this year in their first year in the conference. They made it to the conference championship. They nearly came back against Clemson in that game. But in the college football playoff, I think the nerves just got to them. Plus, playing on the road was definitely a disadvantage again for some of these round 1 teams that were the underseed compared to the higher seed. But SMU finishes 11-3, and then BYU at 11. Boy, BYU destroyed Colorado in their bowl game. They finished out 11-2. It was just a dominating performance by the Cougars. This was definitely a different BYU team compared to where they were, up and down in the second half of the season. And I think you could put BYU now ahead of SMU just because of that head-to-head matchup. So BYU and SMU, both of those teams played in the regular season. And I think you have to put the Cougars now ahead of SMU just because they both have 11 wins. And BYU has 2 losses. SMU has 3. Let's now go from 6 to 10 now. I got Ole Miss at number 10, Tennessee at number 9, Arizona State at 8, Boise State at 7, and then Georgia at number 6. So Ole Miss, they do finish out 10-3. They beat Duke in a blowout in their bowl game. Another 10-win season under Lane Kiffin for this Ole Miss team. They had some tough losses, in the last part of the regular season on their schedule, and that's really what cost them. I think that Florida game kind of cost them that college football playoff spot. Wouldn't be surprised, though, if Ole Miss does make the playoff next year because they are definitely recruiting for next year. They're going to bring in a lot of players from the transfer portal, and we'll see what the future looks like at quarterback for this team. Jackson Dart, of course, going to be probably gone, in my opinion, so Ole Miss here at number 10. Tennessee at number 9, they got blown out by the team that's playing for the national championship, Ohio State. It was just a bad performance for Tennessee. Again, the first round game, at home for Ohio State. Again, that was a big disadvantage here for some of these first round teams. Nico Amaliava, though, it was his first year as a starting quarterback. He was up and down at times, looked good at times, and then sometimes bad at times. But I think Tennessee's biggest win this year is definitely against, Florida. The Georgia game was definitely a bad one for them. They got, beat by a couple of touchdowns, but Tennessee is a team that, just has to get that offense corrected. It's not as explosive as it used to be. It was in the first half of the season, but once they got into SEC play, that's where things got really tough for Tennessee. But Tennessee here at number 9. Arizona State at number 8, a tough loss in overtime against the Texas Longhorns. I think it was double overtime if I'm not mistaken, but yeah, Arizona State, what a job that Kenny Dillingham did this year. Kenny Dillingham is just a young coach. He's in his 30s. He's got a bright future here for the Sun Devils. And 11 wins. This is a team that I was not very high on, just like Illinois. I think I predicted Arizona State to go like 4-8 or 3-9 this year. There was just a lot of people that were not really high on this team, and look what they did. They made it to the Big 12 championship, and they won it, and they got to the college football playoff. Now, having the quarterfinal first round, bye and everything, I think that was also kind of a disadvantage in the playoff for some of these teams. If we had 16 teams, I feel like, all these teams would probably play in a first round game. But Arizona State, I was so impressed with them and their performance against Texas, how they fought coming back in that game, and Cam Skattebo, of course, one of the most physical running backs in Arizona State history, in my opinion. Boise State at number 7. Tough loss for them against Penn State. They weren't really that competitive in the second half of that game. First half, I thought they were, but second half, it was just probably not Boise State's game. Ashton Jeanty, though, will go down as one of the best running backs, though, in the history of college football. Probably the history of college football, or maybe not, but, he was just one of the best running backs in the history of Boise State football. But, yeah, Boise State, they made it to the college football playoff this year. They finished out 12-2. And then Georgia, they finished 11-3 at number 6. Boy, this team just could not do anything against Notre Dame's defense. They also could not stop the running game of Notre Dame as well. And yeah, with Carson Beck being out, I feel like that kind of gave Georgia a disadvantage, but Carson Beck was so up and down this year, and we heard news that he's now entering the transfer portal. We already mentioned it. He is going to Miami, so that's a big deal there for the Georgia Bulldogs. But Gunnar Stockton looks like he has a bright future. We'll see what he looks like at quarterback next year. I still think Georgia is a top 10 team, but they just had a pretty up and down year, and it was a tough schedule. They had to play Alabama and Ole Miss on the road. They also had to play Texas, which they beat Texas twice this year. I know Georgia should be ahead of Texas, but they just played bad against Notre Dame. So these are my rankings here from 6 through 10. Now we go to the top 5 here. Penn State at number 5, Oregon at number 4, Texas at 3, and then the winner of the national championship game is going to be at number 1. So Penn State, tough loss to Notre Dame by 3 points. Penn State looked like the better team in the first half, but second half it was pretty much all Notre Dame. And also the big mistake by Drew Aller throwing an interception. We still don't know if Drew Aller's going to declare for the NFL draft, but they're going to lose Abdul Carter. He's one of the best defensive ends I think in all of college football, and definitely has a bright future for the NFL. But yeah, Penn State, we'll see what kind of decision Drew Aller makes for them. We heard him earlier kind of in the year that he was going to come back for another season, but we just don't really know yet. But I'm assuming he's going to come back. I think there's about maybe a 70, maybe a 50-50 chance that he comes back for another season for Penn State. Oregon at number 4, tough loss to Ohio State in the Rose Bowl. They got blown out 41-21. But what a great season here for the Ducks in their first year in the Big Ten. They won the Big Ten championship, of course, but now you got probably, some questions at quarterback. I think they're going to probably recruit somebody in the transfer portal to come at quarterback, but this team still has a lot of talent. And I know you're probably thinking Oregon probably should be behind Penn State because Penn State made a deeper run, but it's also about the head-to-head for me. Oregon beat Penn State in the head-to-head in the Big Ten championship, so that's the reason why the Ducks stay here ahead of the Nittany Lions. Texas for them, a tough loss against Ohio State in the Goodyear Cotton Bowl Classic in the college football playoff semifinal. Texas is going to lose Quinn Ewers at quarterback, but they got a pretty bright future with Arch Manning there. Arch Manning looks like he's going to be the future of the Texas football team. And I'm not going to lie, Texas in big games this year against very talented teams, they did not do so well. They went 0-2 against Georgia. They lost in the regular season and then lost in the SEC championship. And then, of course, they lose to Ohio State, a very talented team. Their path to the college football playoff wasn't that bad until they met the Buckeyes here. And then Ohio State and Notre Dame, both of these teams are at number 1 as of right now. But like I said, the winner of this national championship game, the winner is going to be that number 1 team at the final top 25 here for the 2024 season. Again, Ohio State is a big favorite. Again, I mentioned this, my 5 reasons video, that Ohio State is a 9.5-point favorite, which is very big to be honest, but don't count out this Notre Dame team. They're a team that can probably at least compete with Ohio State. Maybe for a half or two, but I'm kind of expecting a competitive championship game. I don't really want it to go into a blowout. I want to see it go either way. Either way, if it's a shootout or it could be a low-scoring defensive battle. So that is my top 5, and those are my official final top 25 rankings for the 2024 college football season. Let me guys know what you think about my final top 25, and was this the best college football season in history of college football as well? Thanks for watching this video. Stay tuned for more sports content videos on my Lucas Ross Sports YouTube channel.